We are back for another episode of Summer Showcase Northern Lights, and we are here to talk one of the greatest football leagues on the planet, the Canadian Football League. Super excited about tonight's episode, and as always, I am joined by my trusty co-host, Michael Washington. Michael, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing fantastic. Loving this neg list that we got going on here. That's for sure.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So, given that we didn't have an episode last week and we didn't get to break down the neg lists, for anybody who's tuning in already, we will be discussing the negotiation list, which just came out September 11th, so about a week ago. It's kind of had some time to settle, but at the same time, I feel like at this point, it's interesting to kind of look at what teams have released which names, and at what positions, which I thought was very interesting in particular. Um, why don't we just go ahead and grab it, jump right into it? I'll go ahead and pull up the first graphic, but I'm curious, when you look at these lists, who are some names that stick out to you off the top of your head?
Well, I mean, obviously, when we look at this right away, as far as these lists are concerned, Shavain Cordero for Saskatchewan is a great one. They have him there at San Jose State, but he spent the majority of his time at Hawaii. Guy slung the ball all over the place. Played in this spread style offense that Hawaii has become known for, and was extremely accurate and very put up some good numbers at Hawaii. So Cordero is a guy who I think fits perfect into what the CFL does, and I think it's a great fit for him to be able to step right in and actually make a name for himself up north for sure. I know the guy's Jaden Janke, South Dakota State. A lot of people don't really know a lot about him either at the wide receiver spot, but he was a hell of an FCS player. Um, put up really good numbers at South Dakota State. They were always inside the top four in the FCS championship games, and a lot of that was him, as far as I'm concerned. And I think that he fits the play style of kind of like a Drew, what is it, Waltarski, or those kind. Clark Barnes from Calgary more recently. He kind of fits that same type of play style for Saskatchewan. Another name that sticks out to me here is Emory Jones. Cincinnati, started at Florida. He's over there at Winnipeg. He's a more mobile esque type quarterback, and he's not as accurate as a guy like Zach Collaros is. So I'm curious to see what, if he was to go north, like what the approach would be for Winnipeg, because it's actually, even though they're fairly similar, it's still a very different style of offense or quarterback play for him. But he's a very intriguing option because he was a very well touted, or well recruited quarterback heading into the college ranks as well. And then with Hamilton, Jalen Daniels in Kansas is always one that sticks out because I think he's actually still in college if I remember correctly. And then
Yes, sir.
John Trey Kirkland, he obviously going back to the UFL, but another guy who I think fits this style up north as well, could make a big name for himself. Adrian Martinez obviously is a name up there to look at as well, and then obviously Lance McCutcheon from Montana State. I say obviously, but I mean, if you don't watch college football, you probably don't know who he is. But Montana State has recently come on as a powerhouse in the FCS, and a lot of that was Lance McCutcheon from his basically sophomore year. And that's just more of the offensive guys than they are the defensive guys. But those are the most intriguing options I see so far through these first three teams that you have up here, um, because those are names that people should know.
Absolutely. Also, for anybody who's not aware, I believe Saskatchewan already actually signed Michael Ayers. Ears.
Michael Ayers, yeah, from Samford, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
And that was kind of interesting to see them sign him immediately after these lists came out. It was less than a week later. Um, One of the things that I find very interesting is obviously teams can have 45 names on these lists for anybody who's watching and wasn't aware of that. But they're only required to release 20 names every year. And technically, there's nothing stopping them from releasing the same name twice. So a lot of these guys have already been released on these lists before. which is always kind of interesting to look back on. I don't think there's too many on these particular lists, but I know there's one team that released like 7 quarterback names, and 3 of them have already been released on their list. So it's kind of interesting to look at and just wonder about the strategy behind which names they choose to release, which ones they don't release, if that has any correspondence with who they actually plan on signing or may have already signed in Michael Ayers' case. And maybe they knew an agreement was coming and that's why they put his name on the list, because then, it's not necessarily risking another player, to, like the UFL or something like that, although that's kind of a stretch to think about. But
the interesting thing with Michael Ayers is his college numbers. He technically only played for 3 years, but he played in 2019. COVID canceled the FCS season in 2020, but he didn't play in 2021 either. So he didn't play again until 2022 when he was at Samford. In his time at Samford, he put up 2 seasons over 3,000 yards, and he had 54 touchdowns in that time frame. And he had 12 interceptions, just basically passing. He ran for, college does things weird with sacks numbers going against rushing, but he ran for 116 yards in his career total and 6 touchdowns. So he's got a little mobility, but he threw for over 6,000 yards in 2 seasons, basically, and 54 touchdowns during that time span as well, to only 12 interceptions.
What's his height and weight?
Samford, they have him listed at, let's go take a look here. I do not see it here. Let me, I can find it. Give me a second. He started out at Murray State in 2019, threw 1 pass in 2019, and then transferred, I don't know, 2022 apparently. I don't know. He took a couple of years off, I'm guessing. He is listed at 6'1", 215. So good size, a little bit shorter on the wide receivers, on the quarterback side, but that's what he's listed at. So,
gotcha. I was just thinking more about the potential to be like a 3rd down option. I know they've got Shea Patterson there, but I would imagine that you bring in a younger quarterback like that, with an eye on the future. Obviously, I mean that's why you're looking at all these quarterbacks is for your future, because obviously Trevor Harris can't play forever. Shea Patterson has gotten his chances to start and hasn't looked like a superstar. So there's a couple different questions there when you really look at the quarterback position long term for Saskatchewan. Obviously, I don't think that Michael Ayers is coming in there and replacing any of these guys right away, but that's why you bring him in now. You get him to, you have him start learning the offense, and you start really developing him and working with him and seeing what you have. I mean, obviously, you've got other names here on this list like Siobhan Cordero that you could look at long term. And then, you also have like more of a veteran guy that's on this list as well, and Kellen Mond. And actually, I think if I remember correctly, you were the one who told me that he had been mentioned for spring football by someone else. So, maybe he is kind of having those conversations at this point in his career.
Yeah, Michael Ayers actually played at community college for those 2 years. So he actually stepped back and went to community college and then came back to Samford in 2022. Kellen Mond's an interesting one because I don't think his play style fits Canada.
That's fair.
I feel like he's much more suited for the 11-on-11, more of the pro style type of offense. I don't think he's necessarily I don't think he necessarily has the tools to be successful up north. I think he's better suited to be like a UFL quarterback here in the States.
Gotcha. That's fair. Another name that kind of sticks out to me on this particular list is Keandre Thomas.
Yeah.
He was signed with the Houston Roughnecks for 2024, and then ultimately went on to sign with Pittsburgh, I think it was, and then he was with another NFL team, Carolina and Pittsburgh earlier this season, and has since been released by both of those teams. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he already re-signed with the UFL. I'd have to look back into that. trying to keep track of all these different names for the different leagues gets a little confusing at times. So don't quote me on that one in particular. But obviously, the couple names that stick out to me are guys that I've kind of followed due to the UFL, and Jalen Daniels is another guy that I'm very interested to see what he does with his career as well. And I'm pretty sure you're correct. I want to say he's in his final year of college eligibility this season at Kansas, and he's kind of been a guy that I've been keeping an eye on. But obviously, Adrian Martinez, he's up there with the Jets right now. Was with the UFL, was their MVP last season. So maybe this is a situation where Martinez is on this list because they know he's kind of a long shot. He's probably not coming to the CFL right away, and definitely not in 2024. Maybe long term down the line, but right now you're not necessarily again risking anything to a league like the UFL by putting that name out there. Which again, I don't know how much that actually plays into these teams' strategy, but it's always fun to think about. The secret squirrel side of the scouting world, I guess you could say. But
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, yeah, the secret side of the scouting world for sure.
So moving on to the next three teams, we got Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal here. Lot of UFL names on this list for Toronto. You got Dawood Davis, Delonte Hood, and then also Jalen Twyman down here. So what are your initial thoughts on all these teams? Anybody that sticks out to you that you think we should keep an eye on that might actually end up there?
So one of the biggest ones for me is Kyron Drones. He's still at Virginia Tech this year. He's a senior. He is a big quarterback, big, imposing guy. I do not believe he will get drafted in the NFL. I do not believe that a team will, unless he blows off blows out the doors of his workouts. He's a guy who's probably going to be bouncing a little bit, similar to what we have been seeing. He may dabble in the UFL to play here in the States, but I would be very intrigued to see what he would do at the CFL level, because while his play style doesn't really necessarily strike me as a guy who could succeed up north, I'm also thinking he's talented enough to be able to make a name for himself up north. So I would be really intrigued to see him, in a Toronto uniform, and competing with Chad Kelly. Really, to be honest with you, Trace McSorley obviously is a name that's, I think he's a short yardage guy more than anything. I think it's a great fit for him. I really like Delonte Hood as well for Toronto. We'll see what happens, with him in the UFL, this upcoming year. But that would be for the Toronto side of things. So that would be the name that those would be the names I'd focus on. So, 2 names for Ottawa, 3 names for Ottawa. They're all quarterbacks. Interesting list.
Definitely.
3 guys still in college.
Yes.
Max Brosmer, Kyle McCord, and Cam Miller. I like all 3 of those guys.
Actually, if I'm not mistaken, Dante Shasheri is also,
is he still at Portland State?
Yeah, he's still at Portland State as well.
So there's 4 guys. I wasn't sure if he was still at Portland State. So so 4 quarterbacks all still in college. Cam Miller gives me Chris Shevler vibes, and Kyle McCord is a very, very heavily recruited quarterback that could light up the CFL, because I think his play style fits anywhere. So,
yeah.
I'll let you. I know you're an Ottawa guy, so you can break that down in a minute. And then on the Montreal list here, obviously Frank Gore Jr.'s name, but Chandler Smith was actually recruited to Georgia, transferred to Samford, graduated last year. Was actually surprised he didn't get a chance to stick on a roster somewhere, because he's a pretty talented wide receiver, and he may actually fit the CFL better than the NFL. And obviously EJ Warner is Kurt Warner's son, so.
That would be interesting to see him go up and tear it up in the CFL and then come back down to the NFL. Kind of have a similar story to his dad, but not one that ultimately is the exact same pathway, so to speak. Obviously, his dad played in Europe and in the Arena League before getting back into the NFL and kind of creating that storybook storybook career. One guy that kind of piques my curiosity on this list, and I'll get back to Ottawa in just a moment here, but is actually Jacob De Jesus. I hope I pronounced that
Yeah, De
correctly.
Jesus.
With UNLV, kind of a dual threat guy who I think is perfect for that slot back role up in the CFL, and I think he could be really fun to watch up there. Assuming that he ends up signing, but I think correct me if I'm wrong. You know better than I would, but given that he's still in college right now, there's a very good chance that he's going to get some NFL looks after college. I think he's just too talented overall and too versatile to ultimately, fall this far, straight to the CFL. I don't want to say fall that far. That's a terrible way to put it, but I see him bouncing around, for maybe a season or two in the NFL before we ultimately see him make the jump to an alternative league.
If he doesn't get drafted, he's going to stick on a UFL roster.
Yeah,
I think so. I really think so.
Yeah, I mean, like I was mentioning a moment ago, he's simply too versatile. I mean, he runs the ball, he catches passes, he kick returns, he punt returns. He could probably play gunner on kick return, punt return units. So I definitely think he's a guy who just has way too much value not to end up on an NFL roster at some point. Or, like you said, be a very highly coveted UFL player, which we could see as well. Another couple names on this list is obviously, like I mentioned a moment ago, on Toronto, you see a bunch of different UFL guys on there. I really like Kyron Drones, like you mentioned too. I think that guy could be a perfect short yardage quarterback at on the CFL level. Obviously, Chad Kelly's probably not going anywhere. If you were going to get rid of him, this year was probably the time to make that happen. So I think the guys that they're kind of releasing are more strategic than anything in terms of they're looking for a better option as that short yardage quarterback. I don't think that's really the best role for Cameron Dukes, even though he is a very, very solid runner. I think he's a guy who is probably better suited to actually being like a starting caliber quarterback. You're kind of your quarterback two, not necessarily your third quarterback and short yardage option in the CFL. But getting to Ottawa, one guy that obviously sticks out on this list is a UFL guy, but the reason he sticks out is not because of his UFL play. I mean, he's an unbelievable athlete, and that's Levi Bell. I mean, this dude at like 285 pounds ran like a 4.59 or something like that at his pro day. So I mean, he put up 33 reps on the bench. There's a reason why over the past 2 seasons he played 2 years in the UFL and ended up on an NFL roster after both of them. He's a promising guy who has a lot of talent, and I think ultimately it's going to be interesting to see if he comes up to the CFL long term. I don't see him coming anytime soon, given the fact that he still has ties to the UFL, but at the same time, he could be a guy that we ultimately see double dip. If he gets to a point where he stops seeing NFL opportunities, which might be a while. Again, he's a very high level athlete, so that's a guy who's going to continue to get chances. And then we talked about him briefly a moment ago, but Dante Shasheri, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. I apologize, Dante, from Portland State. I mean, I think that guy he's a guy who I could see getting NFL looks, but probably, and some people may be upset for me saying this, but probably not as a quarterback. He would probably be a guy that a lot of teams would look to move to like a wide receiver, maybe a tight end. I think he's probably built more like a wide receiver than a tight end. But he could be a guy that, maybe he goes to like Denver and they get creative and kind of use him in like a slash role, like a Taysom Hill. But if he goes to the CFL, he's a guy who could stick around as that QB3, be your short yardage guy, develop as a passer in the right offense, and then eventually maybe be the guy for a team long term. So I'm very interested to see, what happens with him over the next year or so. Andrew Trainer, pretty solid offensive lineman. I really like the fact that, we put out an offensive lineman. We need some help there. Hopefully he can sign sooner rather than later. Andre Carter, Curtis Brooks, both guys with some NFL looks recently. Definitely interested to see, if either one of those guys end up in the CFL. I think Carter has a chance. If I'm not mistaken, he was released by Cincinnati in final cuts and has not been picked back up yet.
He was not. No.
So that's definitely a guy I want to look at. And Tariq Black. If Tariq Black can come up to the CFL and stay healthy, that is a name to watch out for. He's once again an unbelievable athlete, but he's had a lot of different injuries throughout his career that concern me for his overall, availability. But, ultimately, really impressed with a lot of the names on these lists. And again, they could amount to nothing. They could be the next superstar. That's what's so interesting about the negotiation lists. If you look back over the recent history, there's guys like Dustin Crum, Tim White, Chad Kelly, Jamal Morrow, who just signed with Ottawa, Khalil Pimpleton, who kind of burst on the scene earlier this season. So, I could go on and on for days on multiple players that have come out of the negotiation list. So while it is kind of a crapshoot, it's also fun to look at these names and see who could be the future stars of the league. But moving on to the final three teams, and we'll go ahead and let you kick off this one because your team's there at the end. But what are your thoughts on these teams? And if you want to start with Calgary, be my guest.
Real quick, Dante Shashir or Shashire, I don't know, will most likely end his college career for throwing over 4,000 yards passing. He has a 37 to 16 touchdown interception ratio, so he's got some room for improvement on that front. He is, however, most likely going to eclipse 2,000 career rushing yards, and he has 21 touchdowns already as a rusher. So, just a couple.
Isn't he?
He's been in college for 6 years.
And he's like 6'3", like 205, right? Somewhat small.
6'3", 200.
Exactly. So, like I said, built more like a wide receiver. We'll see what happens with him.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. I'll save the best for last. So Calgary. Jalen Coker, obviously for BC. Yeah, I talked to you prior to. I love this kid. He is a huge prospect, super raw. Love him. Oh, with Carolina, I was actually surprised he didn't stick with Carolina. Could be a great piece up north. He would probably remind me a lot of Reggie Bagleton as far as a player is concerned up there. That would be kind of the closest thing I could think of. Love the guy. I think that he has a chance to actually stick on a UFL roster, so we may never see him up north. But if we do, keep an eye on him, especially in that BC offense. Noah Fafita is interesting. Love Noah Fafita. The guy is sensational. I think that he has potential NFL talent. The problem with him is he's really small. He's listed at 5'10" in college, and college usually embellishes stuff. So I don't know if he's necessarily even 5'10" per se, but he's been putting up numbers at Arizona. He's a lot of fun to watch. He's very accurate. Reminds me of Drew Brees in a way, like with his stature and size, but it's the accuracy and the ball placement. He might even have a stronger arm than Drew had. So Fafita could be an NFL talent, but it's more the size. I just don't know if he's going to have a place for them. Down here in the States. This is all quarterbacks and wide receivers. I know every single one of those guys. I'm not going to go through every single one. For Edmonton, Malik Cunningham, obviously, he's been all over the place. Fully expect, and again, he's another guy I'm surprised it isn't like a taxi squad guy somewhere or, latched on in that sense. I'd love to see him get a chance to play somewhere and really do something. And Michael Dowell, Miami of Ohio, the defensive back, had a really good career there. And he's a very interesting prospect because with the way that the CFL does their motions, he could really thrive with being able to jam. He was very good at the line at Miami of Ohio. He still has a chance to be very good, high caliber guy at a professional level. And he's probably better suited for a CFL role than most of these other defensive backs that I've seen on this list. So Cam Rising is an interesting name. A lot of injuries at Utah, though. Solid quarterback. Very, very good quarterback. Just a lot of the injuries. It reminds me a lot of like Carson Strong. Super talented. Just injuries have kind of derailed his career a little bit. And then for Calgary, Samson Nakua, the fact that he's not on an NFL roster, at least being able to contribute on special teams and contribute as a depth piece is actually kind of I think it's an injustice primarily. I think he's a very talented guy. He's had some shoddy quarterback play at the UFL level. We know that he was with Michigan last year, but the Saints have a very weak wide receiving core. I was really, really, really surprised. He was one of my biggest surprise cuts coming out of the final cuts for the NFL. That's probably the biggest name on this. Garrett Green is a very interesting prospect for West Virginia. He's a senior as well. He should be coming out. And then obviously Pita down there, defensive lineman at Utah. I don't think I have to say anything about him. I think we all know him if you're a UFL guy. If you're not a UFL guy, this guy is legit and will terrorize quarterbacks all day long.
Agreed. And honestly, he would be great in the CFL. That would be another guy I would love to see double dip. Assuming that's an option for him long term. He's a guy who's borderline NFL, seems to be getting looks every single year, but he never quite latches on anywhere at this point. So, I mean, why not, kind of double dip if your body will allow it and go get that extra money after the UFL season is over. A couple of names on the BC Lions list, both quarterbacks in particular. Hank Bachmeier is a guy who intrigues me quite a bit. I'm curious to see if he can, find a way to stay healthy long term at the next level. Had a lot of different injuries that kind of left him off the field throughout his career, primarily with Boise. But, I haven't really followed him with Wake Forest, so I'm kind of curious to see what happens with him. Anthony Brown, I want to say at one point Anthony Brown said he would not play in the UFL, but that he was not retired either. And obviously, after a year away from the game, he did get workouts with Las Vegas and Buffalo, or spent some time with Las Vegas and Buffalo, but did not latch on and stick. So he is a free agent currently. He would be a very interesting guy at this level as well. On BC's list, there's quite a few names that have been on this list before, and I want to say Caden Salter, Giovanni McCoy, and Noah Fafita are all names that have been on these lists before. So it's just kind of interesting to see that. And I think Mikey Keene as well might have been. One name that I really like on this list is Chris Aludicon. I really like Chris Aludicon as a quarterback. I think that he deserves a chance to start at some level, although I think he's too good in a sense that he will always be able to find some sort of position in the NFL, whether it's on a practice squad or as a quarterback 3. I just think he's too good, and at this point, too experienced for him to completely fall out of the NFL. But if he were ever to, end up on the back end of a practice squad at the end of a season, maybe we could see him, say no to a futures deal and play in the UFL. But I could see him being a long-term guy in the CFL. Maybe we see him, 2026 or beyond, but I honestly don't know if he'll ever end up there. Edmonton, man, if you're a quarterback, Edmonton's probably looked at you more than twice. But I mean, this list is not surprising to see another 6-7 quarterbacks on it. It wouldn't surprise me if they've tried to sign or will try to sign multiple of them at some point or another. Quincy Roche, a great pass rusher. I think he would be a great fit at this level in the CFL, just due to the way the game is played. I like a lot of things he said about Michael Dowell. I'm not really familiar with him, but I'm definitely going to go check him out now. And then I think Malik Cunningham, despite the fact that he was reluctant to play in the UFL, if he wants to have a future as a quarterback, the CFL is probably the best possible bet for him. So for whatever that's worth, maybe we see him in the CFL someday. Would definitely be interested to see what he would be able to do. Moving on to Calgary, there's a couple different players on this list that obviously interest me. I mean, you spoke on a couple of them. Obviously, Samson Nakua. I mean, that guy can do a lot of different things from the wide receiver position that make him incredibly valuable, would make possibly even more valuable to the CFL than the UFL. PETA, like you mentioned, great pass rusher. I think he's a guy who could do a lot of damage in the CFL as well. I honestly wonder if Josh Love will ever end up in the CFL. He has been on the neg list, I want to say 2 or 3 times now. Been released as one of the names on the list. So I feel like, that's kind of leading up to something long term, but who knows? Who knows when it comes to that? Realistically, I mean, like I said, it's always fun to kind of look at these lists, but the chances of all or most of these players ending up on rosters is very small. Obviously, that's why you see 6-7 quarterbacks in one team. But yeah, I mean, it's ultimately going to be fun to follow along and try and see which of these players end up signing, and if there are any more that sign in the 2024 season.
Interesting note on Hank Bachmeier, right quick. He's in his 6th year in the league, in college. He has thrown for 9,329 yards in his career. So he is likely to eclipse 10K, which is more than most people do at the NFL level. However, he only boasts a 55 to 24 touchdown to interception ratio. He's only eclipsed double-digit passing touchdowns twice in his career. Wake Forest is still out. He already has 4 this year. So definitely needs some kind of room improvement because he's not really much of a runner. So he needs to get those numbers up if he's going to thrive at the CFL level, because we all know that the CFL level, it's really accuracy is the name of the game. So
True. One more quick name before we move on that I'm really interested to see if he ends up in the CFL, and that's Deshaun Fenwick. I think that could be a guy who has some promise at this level, but we'll see. Like I said, there's a lot of questions on if any of these guys will ever make it to this level. Real quick, we're going to hit a commercial, and then we'll come back and we will discuss a couple different quarterback moves that have popped up recently.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school. Oh, wow. This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I used to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
All right. So the big news at quarterback recently was the fact that Winnipeg lost Chris Streveler to a season-ending injury. I believe it's an Achilles. Do you recall?
yes.
Well, unfortunate blow to Winnipeg and Chris Streveler, who had just come back with Winnipeg this season. Obviously, a very mobile guy. Their third down, short yardage quarterback, and then he's also been their second option in times that Zach Claros has come off the field. So obviously Winnipeg had to go out and make some moves and bring in some quarterbacks. So Dave Naylor was the first one on the job here with the information that they were bringing in Brian Scott and Jake Dolgala, and ended up signing them both. And correct me if I'm wrong, you might not have caught it. Didn't they sign another quarterback as well?
I haven't seen it. I'm not sure. I just knew about these two. So
Gotcha. Well, we'll go ahead and discuss these two while I try and look up the other name on that list, because I'm pretty sure there is one. But what are your immediate thoughts with Jake Dolgala finding another home this season, and then also Brian Scott hopefully having another opportunity to stick in the CFL?
I'm not surprised they brought Scott back because Scott's been with them. No, he was with Toronto.
Yes, sir.
But he was with Toronto, who's a winning organization, so it's not really surprised to see Scott back in the league in some capacity. Jake Delgado is an interesting one, only primarily because I don't really think that fits his playing style, fits really with anything that they've done. Maybe he's the short yardage guy because Brian, I don't think really will be. So maybe they're going to make Delgado the short yardage guy. I'm not really sure. I'm just more intrigued at the fact that they brought in Brian Scott because, you know, he's a guy who kind of very similarly fits what Zach Collaros does as far as play style. I think Collaros is probably a little more, mobile, but throwing wise, I think they're pretty close. It's just Delgado was just interesting to me because I don't really think that he turned any heads when he started a few games, in my opinion. But played all right, but I wouldn't go out of my way to be like. So I don't know. Maybe they're going to make him the short yardage guy.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, obviously Brian Scott can move, and he is a runner a little bit, but I don't think he's necessarily the guy that you want to trot out there as your short yardage option. Another option as that short yardage guy could be Darren Granger, which is the third quarterback I was thinking about that they brought in. 6'4", 225 pounds, played at Furman and Georgia State.
Yeah.
That does not surprise me that you knew that.
Georgia State quarterback. He was a Panther down there at in the Sun Belt. He actually led them to a pretty good career down there when he started. Very inaccurate. So if it's going to be a short yardage guy, it very possibly could be him because he is fairly mobile.
That would make sense. I mean, he's actually a guy who's been with the team before, so they know what they're getting. He was with the team earlier this season, was released in June, and then ultimately brought back just a couple days ago, the 16th. So definitely interested to see how that quarterback situation works out. In fact, do you remember who else is on their quarterback depth chart?
I don't remember who was behind Shrevler.
Is that Eric Barrier?
Was he in Winnipeg?
Yeah. I should know this stuff.
I mean,
just a moment.
I would love to see Barrier be the guy, but
Terry Wilson, my fault.
Terry Wilson, that's right.
Terry Wilson. So yeah, definitely. They do have some options, but it's going to be interesting to see exactly how they approach that. I mean, that's
quarterbacks.
An interesting quarterback room. Yeah, exactly. 5 quarterbacks is extremely crazy, but I guess you've already lost one. Collaros hasn't played all that well. He is getting up there in age. It's not necessarily the worst idea to load up on quarterbacks and have them prepared and ready to step in, especially considering that we just had the expansion of the practice roster. So you have a little bit of, leeway there to work with toward the end of the season. So a lot of these teams are getting creative with how they're filling these practice squad spots. And that's another thing that we could kind of get into if you wanted. But another big injury that just came out, I believe, yesterday, one that is going to be a huge blow for anybody who's a Red Blacks fan. I'm extremely disappointed by it. But our Darius Pickett is done for the year. He also had an Achilles injury. He's kind of been the heart and soul of Ottawa's defense and really the whole team, if I'm being honest, since he was signed away from Toronto this past season. And ultimately just a huge blow to the leadership and the optimism, I guess you could say, in that room. I assume that he's going to be still, around the team and you're doing his best to keep guys' moral up, but definitely a huge blow regardless of how you look at it. He's been one of the most disruptive players on this defense so far this season.
It's tough for his career too because of the style of position, the position that he plays. Like Achilles are very hard to recover and be able to get your quickness back, your explosiveness back, especially from a speed standpoint. So he is probably, when he gets back, and he'll get back and he'll get fully healthy, he may have to adjust though overall how he plays the game and try to find other ways to become that like wily veteran type player, because he plays that hybrid role, and or at least I believe Ottawa still has him in the hybrid role, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He's been kind of bouncing back and forth between halfback and strong side linebacker.
So he might need to actually just make the shift to strong side linebacker and, run with it from there, because otherwise it's going to be tough for him to regain that top end speed. So
I definitely agree. I mean, it's one of those things that it is concerning for his long term durability and well-being and his role with the team, obviously, like you just mentioned. That is one thing that's definitely going to come into play at some point, hopefully a little bit later down his career, but it might be something that Ottawa approaches sooner now because of this injury. But there was one other topic in particular, a couple other topics I wanted to get to in terms of transactions, and one of them is Montreal. It just seems like Montreal, every time you think they might have taken a blow that's going to, slow them down or quell their momentum a little bit, they go out and they bring somebody back from the NFL. And in this particular time, it was, I'm going to butcher this name, so I apologize, Lawal Ugwak. He was with Tampa Bay for camp, played in all 3 preseason games, was released, and he was a former first-round pick by Montreal, so he is now returning to the team. Great move. Once again, Montreal gets back another NFL-style talent. What are your immediate thoughts? Montreal gets stronger once again.
I just think it's kind of the, we've seen it with the CFL the last few years with Toronto and Winnipeg being near the top. Like every single time an injury hits, we think it might be the derailment of the season, and then they find somebody that had been with the team before and bring them back and turn around, and next thing you know, they didn't lose a step, right? And they might have even gotten better in some cases. So this very well could be the same thing as far as the with Montreal is concerned. And it's scary as we get to this time of year, especially when it comes to Montreal, because it's very possible that even with the injury, they still found a way to get better. So I'm sure the tie with Calgary this past weekend was a little bit of a blow, and it's kind of surprising to a lot of people, but he'll get back into the rhythm of things and start settling back into the CFL style before long.
I'll say it for you. Calgary is a better team than their record lets on, by the way.
I agree too.
So the Elks have also recently added somebody to their coaching staff, which I thought was interesting. Aaron Grimes has recently retired as an Elk and then joined the coaching staff. He was a former member of the CFL mentorship program, which is kind of basically much like a lot of the different academies the NFL has. They kind of groom players to be future coaches. And in this particular case, it worked out perfectly for him as he moves up to be a CFL coach. Edmonton's kind of already rolling. What do you make of this particular move and ultimately just how Edmonton's turned things around so far this season?
They just have to be careful that they don't have too many cooks in the kitchen, right? Like you bring in too many, coaches, or you get clashes of styles. You get, you don't want to disrupt anything, right? You got to make sure that you're finding a piece that's going to fit in and flow. I'm pretty sure that that's exactly what they did here. Is they found a piece that they can just fit in, plug in, and let it just kind of naturally flow on itself. So, I don't know if it necessarily will improve or hurt the team, but it's not going to hurt to have a guy who may have the same vision as everybody else, right? Like that's usually the way that this goes. There's no real true major way of knowing what a coach brings until after it's all said and done, right? So maybe we see a nice improvement over the course of the next couple of weeks. What is his official role? Did they ever announce his official role?
Defensive assistant.
It was a defensive assistant. So, yeah. So, I mean, we'll have to see what the payoff might be, but defensively, it's probably the one spot that they could use the most help. But they got a good coaching staff in place right now that they have that they have players that believe in them. So that's important.
Agreed. Agreed. I think it's a good move because of the fact that he's got such deep ties to Edmonton. You know, I mean, he's literally been with the team for, I think it's like 8 seasons now, you know, played 3 seasons from 2013 to 2015, spent a brief stint with my Eagles, just narrowly missed out on winning a Super Bowl in 2017, but that's okay. I went back to Edmonton for 2017, 2018. Bounced around to BC and then was back in Edmonton. Tried to make Winnipeg's roster this season, but ultimately was let go, and now he's a coach. You know, this is a guy who played in 95 CFL games, was very productive his entire career, so it's definitely a guy that I think has a lot of knowledge to pass down to the players that are in Edmonton secondary. But the final topic tonight, and this is a topic that I personally really am excited to discuss and get your thoughts on, but it's attendance. You probably saw this pop up a moment ago by accident, but I mean, man, look at some of these numbers for this attendance right now for the CFL, and ultimately, I feel like this is very encouraging for some teams, a little discouraging for others, but ultimately, the fact that we're getting a a solid $20,000 to $25,000 or 20 to 25,000 person average in the CFL. I think we're kind of trending the right direction, but we will see, how ultimately this pans out the rest of the way and into the future.
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at these numbers. I mean, obviously, you can kind of see the trend this late in the year as to some of these numbers being down, which contributed to the numbers being down overall. I'm assuming that this is from the year previous, the arrows off to the side. My guess would be because it was in Hamilton and it was in Calgary and both teams look like they're both out of it. Fans probably just didn't turn out for it, but that's still an impressive number for two teams that have 4 wins, right? They have 8 wins combined between the two of them. And Hamilton brought in the most this year, this weekend, and Calgary was, right there with BC, who's in the playoff hunt, right? So that's intriguing from a standpoint. And if I'm the CFL, and more importantly, if I'm the CFL teams, I should be really happy with how this is. And I hear that their viewership numbers are pretty strong across the board, especially on CBS. So kudos to them for finding a way. Like they had strong numbers with ESPN when they showed on ESPN2, and it sounds like there wasn't too much of a dip off with CBS. So yeah, I'm happy and excited about this, and hopefully they can keep it up for sure.
Agreed. I mean, anytime you can have an 8,300 fan drop and you're still over 20,000, you're probably in the good standing as far as the attendance numbers. Obviously, these numbers could be a lot better, and I'm sure the CFL would love to see them, in the 30 to 40,000 range, sellouts across the league. But ultimately, any league that's not necessarily the NFL is not quite there yet, and it's unfortunate. But at the same time, this is a lot better than a lot of the UFL teams. So,
Yep.
Not every team can be a St. Louis Battlehawks when you're not in the NFL. So considering the fact that they're getting a solid 20,000 across the board, I'd say that's a great, step in the right direction for the CFL, as well as, like you said, the viewership numbers, which have seemingly been solid across the board. And then I imagine, I haven't really looked into the numbers on CFL Plus, but I would imagine that the viewership skyrocketed when CFL Plus came out, especially on the U.S. side of the border, given the fact that we haven't had, complete access to every game in the past. So I would love to see those numbers, in fact. So I wonder if they're going to come out with those at any point.
Yeah, I don't know. The CFL is usually pretty tight, close to the vest when it comes to a lot of numbers for a lot of things. So I don't know if they will with for CFL Plus, but I've been trying to keep my eyes out on it as much as possible to see if they do or will. So maybe it will be an end of the year thing that we get. But yeah, everything I've heard and read, they're pretty happy with the CBS deal down here in the States. So
as they should be. I really think that that's a good partner for alternative football. I mean, like we talked about it last season, there was a triple header a couple different times where it was an AFL game, surrounded by 2 CFL games or vice versa, 2 AFL games, and there was a CFL game sandwiched in the middle there. Obviously, there's one last thing we have to do before we get out of here for the night, and that is, of course, our predictions and talk about the betting odds.
Oh man,
So,
it's been terrible for me lately. I had a terrible last weekend. Those 3 games killed me. I think I lost all 3 of them. So
I would have to look back. I know I lost at least 2, so I think we're both on that same boat. And actually, my record, although it was great in the beginning of the part of the season, it started to come back down to the pack recently. So we'll see. We'll see what I can come up with this week. But obviously, the first game at hand right here is Hamilton in Toronto versus Toronto, which is obviously a big reason why they're 6.5 point favorites here. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think Toronto can cover this. I know Hamilton's played well in the last few games. They've kind of had it. Toronto just seems to be a different team right now, and I don't know the win against. Wait, that was them that beat BC, right? Or was that Winnipeg? I don't remember off the top of my head now. They played last week.
Well, it wasn't last week, but I think it was 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago?
I think it was Toronto. I'd have to look back now.
No, Toronto did beat BC. They scored 33 on them. They beat them 33-17. So Toronto's coming out off a big win against BC, and they seem to be finally finding their stride, which is very scary to say this late in the year. So I think they can beat Hamilton. I just don't know if Hamilton has enough firepower to be able to keep up with Toronto. So I take Toronto of the 6.5, and I'm going to actually probably say I'll say the over. I think this might be a pretty high scoring game. So I'll say 32-23 Toronto.
Just barely in the over, but it's still over. I'm picking Toronto as well. I just don't think that Hamilton's going to come in and beat them at home, especially with the way they've been playing recently. I know they just won a game, but that was against a shorthanded Ottawa team. Toronto's got Chad Kelly back. I know they haven't necessarily looked like the MOP Chad Kelly of last year, but I just think Toronto's got too much firepower on offense and maybe even special teams. Maybe we get a Janorian Grant touchdown return again. But I'm picking Toronto. I don't know about the over in this game. That I think I'm going to take the under. I'm definitely taking the under. So I'm actually going to say that it's going to be probably around 25 to say like 18, with Toronto, barely covering that spread.
Ooh.
Sorry, don't want to tell you.
Boo.
Well, I guess if you're betting this week, pick Toronto. Pick Toronto to cover. We're split on the over, though. So you'll have to use your own discretion on that one.
You'll have to use your own discretion on that one, yeah.
But next up is Saskatchewan versus Calgary, which I think this is actually going to be a really good game. Calgary's kind of seemingly finding a little bit of momentum here recently. Saskatchewan's on a slide. You got Calgary 2.5 point underdogs at home, and the over-under is 51. So what say you, Mr. Michael?
This is interesting because, like we've discussed, Calgary's a better team than what the record shows. They've played a lot of teams tough. As you can tell, they're only a 2.5 point dog, which means, they're a slight favorite in a way. Saskatchewan is they're such an interesting team. They started out the year so hot. You thought that they were going there. They hit this losing streak. This could be a trap game for Saskatchewan, to be honest with you. I'm actually taking Calgary. Maybe you can call it a homer pick. I don't know, but I'm taking Calgary, which means I'm taking the 2.5 as well. And I'm going to say the under in this one, though. I don't know. I don't think either team gets quite to that. I'm going to say Calgary wins this game 24-17. More of a traditional score. It'll probably end up being 24-18 or something with some kind of rouge somewhere in there. But I'm going to say 24-17. A little more traditional.
You said Calgary, correct?
Calgary, yeah.
I actually went the other direction on this one. I picked Saskatchewan. Honestly, I had almost zero faith in Saskatchewan as of recently. Every time I pick them, they end up losing as of late. But I still think Corey Mace is a great coach, and I think this past week he lit a fire under his team. If in case you didn't hear, there was a day earlier this week in practice where there was more practice sessions scheduled. He took his team off the field and ultimately, I guess, gave him an earful. I'm told that they returned back to the practice field after the fact. But anytime you have a locker room full of veterans, guys like A.J. Ouellette, Trevor Harris, stuff like that, they're not going to take kindly to the fact that they're getting chewed out like that. So I think it's going to light a fire under them. I think they're going to go ahead and get a victory this week, even though they're on the road. And honestly, it sounds like they better. Otherwise, some people might start getting cut really quick. I'm going to say 26 to, I almost said 10, but I don't think that's fair to Calgary. For the fact that I'm going to be right next to your score, 26 to 18, that wasn't necessarily my plan. But, I do think it's going to be around a 7-8 point deficit. And then ultimately Saskatchewan's going to take the win. Moving on to the next game. There's actually 4 games this weekend again. We got Montreal at Ottawa. Ottawa is a 3-point underdog at home. And honestly, that could probably be a 7-point underdog, and I wouldn't argue with it. Montreal is just too good right now. But what are your thoughts on this one?
Montreal. Ottawa's played well most of the year, but that Pickett injury I think is going to be huge. This defense is going to be very tough to rebound from. I'm taking Montreal -3 in this one. 49.5. These scores seem kind of high sometimes, but I think they hit the over barely in this one. I'm going to say Montreal 28, Ottawa 23.
Okay.
But I think it will be a close game. I just think that Ottawa's defense is going to struggle down the stretch, and without having Pickett, it's going to make it even more difficult because he did play that hybrid role, and that's a very tough position to replace. You usually have to replace it with 2 people instead of just 1, and if you're doing that, then you're obviously slacking somewhere or giving some sort of slack somewhere else.
Agreed. And I'm actually very interested to see how they ultimately play that position. There's a couple different ways they could go, specifically at strong side linebacker. I know they've been kind of working in Bennett Williams, but my personal pick, I know it's not really CFL styled, but I would put Davion Taylor there. And I would put Bennett Williams back at halfback and then, roll some coverages that way and get creative with how I use Taylor. But he's got the speed to play the position. So it'll be interesting to see how they approach this. I don't think they do that. I think ultimately Williams will start at strong side linebacker and we'll see somebody else at halfback. But I'm picking Montreal. I might be a Red Blacks fan, and I'm often a homer when it comes to my picks for Ottawa. But this is one situation where I got to be realistic. I don't see them beating Montreal. If they do, great. Honestly, that'll give me all the hope in the world for the rest of the season. But I think they're a good team. I just don't think that they have enough currently due to the injuries they've suffered as of late to beat Montreal. Maybe down the line when we see them in the playoffs, if we see them in the playoffs, we might have better luck. But I'm actually going to go with a little bit higher score than you and a bigger deficit, actually. I'm saying 36-20. And Montreal's gonna take it by almost 3 scores over Ottawa. So not a score I'm really super happy about putting out there, but I believe last time we played, or maybe maybe it was the first time we played this season. They beat us 46-20 something. So that's not something that I really will forget anytime soon. Last game of the weekend is, of course, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at the Edmonton Elks, who are the underdogs at home by 1.5 points. So it's basically a pick 'em. And who are you picking?
Edmonton. Weird to say against Winnipeg. This Winnipeg team's not been the same. I don't know how much of a factor not having Shrevler will. I'm not sure if Shrevler's injury will have a huge impact on the game. However, with as often as CFL teams end up on the 1 yard line, it could play a huge factor in the short yardage quarterback game. Edmonton's rolling, though. They're playing really well right now. I'm expecting this late season collapse to happen like we saw last year. I don't know if it's going to come. If it does, this will be the game where it comes. I am picking Edmonton to win this game at the +1.5. But this is going to be a very close game and a very high-scoring game. I expect both teams to score over 30. I think Edmonton wins by 3, 36-33.
Just some quick statistics. Through week 15, Winnipeg has the lowest net offense. They have the third lowest first downs overall. And they also have the second to lowest yards per play on offense, all which could that could kind of lend it to the fact that Shrevler is going to be a huge loss for them. What was your score prediction? I apologize.
36-33 Edmonton.
Awesome. So I personally am going the other direction. I'm picking Winnipeg, but this is another game where I'm not super confident in my pick. This could go either way, and honestly, if Edmonton won, it wouldn't surprise me at all, especially with the way they've been playing as of recently. But I'm picking Winnipeg mainly because of the fact that they found their momentum, and I just can't. Once they start looking like the old Winnipeg, it's going to be one of those situations where every other team's going to just have no chance. And I know they're not quite there yet, but I don't think that Collaros is quite done yet, and I don't think that Winnipeg is ready to give up their title as a dynasty, so to speak. You know, I know they didn't make the Grey Cup last season, but they were still very much in the thick of things all the way to the end of the year. So I'm picking Winnipeg. This is definitely going to be a close game, and I don't know that it's going to be quite as high scoring as you said. I'm looking at probably like a 24-18 game in this one, and a lot of that is dependent on who plays quarterback for Edmonton, although I believe Trey Ford is back, if I'm not mistaken.
We are on what week now? So Edmonton's played 13 games. 13 games.
While
they are averaging 29.6 points a game. They're averaging almost 30 points a game, and you're taking the under.
Yep.
Wow, that's ballsy.
I could be wrong.
I just think it's ballsy. I mean, I love it. I love taking the gamble like that, but
we'll see. Wasn't it 2 weeks ago that we were talking about how good Winnipeg's defense was?
Winnipeg's defense has played real well. They hit the under against Saskatchewan the week before, but that was Saskatchewan. And then the week before that, they gave up 33 to Saskatchewan.
That's a good point.
They won that game. And then the game before that, they gave up 26-23 against Hamilton. So it's been under, so which means this is an over week. If you follow the trend, or if you believe in the trend.
Like I said, I could be definitely wrong on this one. It's not one that I'm super confident about. And, I
I mean,
haven't kept track of my scores, but I guarantee I haven't hit a single one. So
I will say, if it does help, they have the lowest points against in the league.
that makes sense.
They've only surrendered 274 points. So it is definitely a possibility that, because they are a really good defense, so it is a possibility it hits the under. I just am expecting fireworks.
That's perfectly fair for sure. For anybody watching, we are actually sponsored by this great website here, BetUS. That's why we always use them for our betting odds. They actually recently just sent me a very exciting email, if you are a bettor, that the bonuses for people who use our code are going up quite a bit. So if you sign up using our code, you can actually get up to 125% match bonus, up to $2,000. And if you do the casino side, not really my forte, but hey, if that's your thing, I'm not here to judge. You can actually get a 200% casino sign up bonus up to $5,000. So definitely a great deal. Make sure you use our code and or our link, which should be in the description below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're thoroughly intrigued by those offers and you're watching on any other platform, make sure you pop over to YouTube and give us a subscribe while you're there as well. So I mean, I think that pretty much puts a bow on this week for me. Is there anything in particular you wanted to discuss before we get out of here, or any final thoughts?
No, I think that for the most part, that would be that's good. I think it would be good right there. So
Sounds good. I believe we covered everything or the major pieces of news this past weekend. If you are a fan of the CFL, let us know by liking this video and sharing it with all the CFL fans in your life. Let us know where we can improve. We're big on constructive criticism. I will take it right where I need it and hopefully fix and correct everything we possibly can and make this the best possible show we can. Appreciate all of the over 40 people that have tuned in live pretty consistently since we started this stream. Gotta love that we're getting, more and more viewers on a regular basis. All of you guys that are sticking with us, we really appreciate. And all of the people who are tuning into multiple different shows a day, really appreciate you guys. And we're trying to work out some things so we can do some giveaways on moving forward to hopefully give you guys a little bit more incentive to keep watching. But with that in mind, make sure you hit that like button, comment, subscribe, share this with your friends, and catch us tomorrow. So you've got Dynasty Academy. There's a couple other shows. There's multiple shows. Always shows coming at you. I don't have the schedule right in front of me, but like I said, just make sure you're subscribed on YouTube. Everything we do goes out on YouTube. There's other platforms that kind of are hit or miss depending on the shows. So if you want to catch everything we do, YouTube's the best place to be.
Summer Showcase will return for its last episode of the season Tuesday. Me and Randy Schrader will discuss the championship game. That's talking about the ELF. Dynasty Academy tomorrow, talking about Dynasty, Campus to Canton, Devi Fantasy Football. That will be at 8:15, 8:30, usually between Thursdays, 8:15, 8:30 start time. And Goal Line Stand, I believe, is coming back. We still got work out a few kinks there. In a couple weeks, it should be back to cover the NFL. So
absolutely. And then we've got the NFL pregame report every Sunday at 9 a.m. my time, Mountain Time, so 11 a.m. Eastern. And then we also have, NFC Beast is coming back as well. It just came back last week. We'll have another episode this week. So if you're an NFL fan, we got plenty of content coming for you as well. We don't just do alternative football. In fact, here's a little promo to tell you about exactly everything we do.